Podcasts on UNC-TV.org are made possible through the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting UNC-TV.
The April 16 tornadoes that swept across the state damaged more than just property. The lives of families and individuals were severely impacted as well. But there are steps that can be taken both to prepare for and to recover from the financial crisis such disasters can cause. To learn more, I recently spoke with Erin Campbell of Beacon Financial Strategies. Erin Campbell, welcome to North Carolina Now.
Thank you for having me.
Now, you are a certified public accountant as well as a certified financial planner. And usually when folks come to you, they're talking about financial issues, but normally when it comes to financial issues after a disaster or even planning before a disaster, folks usually don't talk about that much. How important is planning for a financial disaster?
Well, I think planning in general is important. Financial planning, not just for retirement, for your kids' education, but also thinking about these emergency situations. Having an emergency fund available, making sure you have 3 to 6 months of living expenses at your ready in a money market, savings account, something like that, so that you can get your hands on the money should you need it for any type of disaster, be it a natural disaster or just, your air conditioner breaks this month. So I think that's very important.
How important is it to check on like insurance policies, perhaps for your car, health? How important is that?
It's very important. Every time they send that stuff to you every year, you ought to check and make sure you have the proper coverage, whether it be life insurance, disability, auto insurance, homeowner insurance, all that stuff is very important. So you should definitely look and make sure you have the proper coverage.
And usually when you're going through these, a financial disaster, just a disaster and the financial elements that follow, a lot of people tend to fall more in debt. How do you address this issue?
Well, first of all, not having credit card debt prior to an emergency is a good thing. Pay off those credit cards. Make sure that you have the credit available should you need to tap into those things. And then once a disaster has actually occurred, you ought to call the creditors, ask them for some leniency, some time to kind of make those payments in an orderly fashion and prioritize the things that you pay. Make sure you pay your mortgage, pay your rent, all that good stuff.
And sometimes following an immediate disaster, usually you get sometimes there are scams and other things that are out there. What should someone do, especially when it comes to making rash decisions after a disaster? Well,
definitely you need to make sure that you check into contractors and things that come to rebuild your house or come to help you out. But then also make sure you get proper advice. Call your CPA, call another advisor that you trust, and make sure that you make the decisions financially that are sound financial decisions as well as tax efficient decisions.
Now, of course, a lot of people go through various stages. Some folks may not have any type of advice as far as their finances are concerned. When is it time to seek professional help with your finances?
Well, I think that most people are not, in the first few weeks, they're just trying to survive. And I think that it takes some time to start to look for that advice. And I think that once you get to the point where you need to make longer term decisions, how to pay off the debt that you've incurred, whether to borrow from your 401k plan, whether to take cash value out of your life insurance policies, all those things that are going to affect you long term, that's when you really need to seek professional help and make sure you get proper advice.
We were talking about health issues, and in some cases, some people may become disabled through a disaster. How do they go about addressing this particular situation?
Well, again, have an emergency fund. Make sure your debt's paid off ahead of time. But once you're disabled, if you are disabled, seek, employer disability insurance, possibly workman's comp. There may be federal benefits such as Social Security disability available to kind of help you. Unemployment even if you're not disabled but you just lose your job. Those types of benefits are definitely out there to help people out in those situations.
When it comes to perhaps retirement, some people may fall on hard times after a disaster. Should they go into their retirement funds? Is that advisable?
Well, It is if there's no other place to go. And I think, again, seeking proper advice on that, whether it makes sense to take a distribution outright and pay taxes and possibly even penalties on it, or to just borrow from those funds, knowing that you'd have to pay it back. But I think, again, seeking proper advice would make the most sense, a personalized advice on that. So,
as a CPA, what would you consider to be the various phases one would go through as they experience a disaster, and how should they handle it financially?
Well, in the beginning, I think when we think about the things that have happened here recently, you're not really necessarily thinking about your financial decisions other than just putting groceries on, back in your refrigerator and making sure that everyone's safe. And then there's dealing with the insurance companies, making sure that you properly apply for the claims and get that stuff. And then there's I think the third stage, which is longer term, the decisions on how to pay the debts off. What long-term decisions do we need to make? How do we make adjustments as we rebuild from everything?
And dealing with CPAs, what type of information do you have out there to let viewers know where they can get more information about their financial planning before a disaster and even after a disaster?
Well, the AICPA has a great website, 360financialliteracy.org, but FEMA also has a great website that talks about these types of things, as does the Red Cross, and FEMA actually has one called ready.gov that I think is pretty good. It talks about making a plan and knowing what you're going to do in an emergency.
And I know we hear it throughout when we're talking about preparing for hurricane season, and since we've recently gone through this series of tornadoes here in North Carolina, if there was one piece of advice you would give to people today, what would that be?
I think to have a plan and to know what you spend every month, live within your means, have an emergency fund, make sure you have a fallback, and that you know that you're prepared for anything that might hit you.
Erin Campbell, the co-owner of Beacon Financial Strategies, and you're also a member of the North Carolina Association of Certified Public Accountants. Thank you so very much for stopping by and sharing your insights with us.
Well, thanks for having me.
Podcasts on UNC-TV.org are made possible through the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting UNC-TV.